Hey, How the Church Works listeners. This is producer Heather, and it's been a while. We wanted to pop back into the feed to tell you about another show some of the How the Church Works team has been working on. And since we know you like learning about and reshaping Adventist history as we know it, we think you're really going to like it. It's called They Also Served, and it explores the untold stories of women who made a big impact on American Christianity, Adventism, and the world. It's hosted by historian Heidi Olson Campbell, and it's coming out this summer. And we're so excited to share it with you that we dropped a little sneak peek of the first episode today. You can find it over on the They Also Served podcast feed, or just keep listening. Don't forget to subscribe to They Also Served so you don't miss when we start dropping episodes this summer. All right, here we go.
What's the overarching title, Heidi? Like, what is it?
They Also Served. It's based on a book by a woman named Ava Covington. Dr. Lisa Clark Diller is a professor of history at Southern Adventist University. She says she enjoys reminding students that not only was the world not always the way it is now, but that humans could have made choices that would have resulted in very different outcomes. And as a historian who's also an Adventist, she was intrigued by the concept of doing a podcast that focused on the stories of Adventist women. We talked about Ava Covington's book. She actually talks about, we're forgetting about our Adventist women who worked. And she has a little vignettes of different Adventist women who served around the world, because it points out that way back in 1930s, like, women are concerned that women's names are completely being dropped out of Adventist history.
Gerda Lerner, who kind of spearheaded women's history in the mid-20th century, one of her essays she writes is on why history matters. She talks about the fact that women historically would compile lists of important women in like almost every century, having no idea that women in the previous century had already done this. They always think they're having to reinvent the wheel because no one keeps their books in published, or they can't read them. Like, so the fact that you even know someone did this and you can be like, okay, we're going to build on this, is partly because of something called women's history, which said, hey, we're going to recover that so that we're not starting over all the time, like redoing it all, where we're like, oh no, we stand on the shoulders of other people who've also done this.
It's not just that stories aren't being repeated. Sometimes it can be hard to find any bit of the story at all. Women have been mentioned in Adventist histories before, but the first book that focused exclusively on women in Adventist history was written in 1940 by Ava M. Covington. In the foreword of the book, Covington says,
"Much has been written and said about the men of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, who were the pioneers of the message, the founders of the message. But with the exception of Mrs. E. G. White, little has been written about the women who have pioneered with the pioneers and stood by their side, some even going before them, encouraging them by their faith and confidence in them and in their message."
Ava Covington, page 5, foreword. And because she wrote it, the stories of these women are stamped into history. The book is short, it's under 200 pages, and covers the stories of only 15 women, including Ellen White, who she mentions much has been already written on. But as her team was discussing this book and getting to know the stories inside it, we started to wonder, who is Ava Covington? This woman who so painstakingly researched and preserved the stories of these other women. Where is her story? The book doesn't have an About the Author section, and it doesn't even tell us what Ava's qualifications were. Whether she was a writer, a teacher, an archivist, or just a woman who had a special interest in Adventist history. Why didn't Ava Covington have her own listing in any of our books about Adventist history? We found the answer in one of the final lines of the foreword in her book.
But these particular ones were chosen not as the most outstanding women of the denomination, although undoubtedly some were, but rather because of the availability of the biographical material.
The missing pages of Ava Covington Wall's story are a good example of why women's stories are often missing from history books, from historiography. Historiography is a word that literally means the writing of history. It refers to the study of how history was written, who wrote it, and what factors influenced how it was written. It's not that women didn't do things, it's that for various reasons, nobody bothered to write it down. Finding information on Ava's life in the Adventist archives is challenging. Like most American women, Ava changed her last name when she got married. Her husband's last name was Wall. Ava didn't get married until later in life. She was 41. But it does mean tracking down information on her, and most married women can become very difficult when their name changes. This is a frequent challenge for historians of women's history, because the women who do write often highlight the contributions of others, and especially the men in their lives. Often, their contributions disappear and are subsumed or attributed to their significant other. Another challenge of finding records of Ava's story is that she didn't have any children to write memoirs of her or keep the memory of her story alive.
One of the problems is simply that these women are not talking about themselves very much.
This is Laura Wibberding.
So unless they write an autobiography, we lose a lot. Or if they actually write reports about what they're doing and put these in Adventist periodicals.
Laura is an assistant professor of history at Pacific Union College in Angwin, California, and we'll talk with her in episode 5.
It appears that women are much more important in the history of the Christian church than is usually been shown in history books. Oftentimes the theologians, the leaders of women, are barely mentioned or they're given cursory mention. And they probably did more to advance the cause of Christianity in its earliest stages and even later stages than most men will give credit for in the history books.
This is Dr. Ed Allen, who teaches at Union Adventist University, formerly Union College. What are some of the challenges that we find researching women in Christianity?
Well, a part of it is the paucity of sources. There's just not a lot of information out there. Oftentimes you have to go searching in diaries or make a special effort to find information that isn't readily available otherwise. That makes it difficult to make the case that a particular woman had a significant impact on the advancement of the church.
Thanks for listening to this sneak preview of episode 1 of They Also Served. We'll be back this summer with more stories of these incredible women. See you then.